Good evening. I'm welcoming Dr. Kristen Goodell from Boston University Chobanian Abedizian School of Medicine. Hopefully I pronounced that right. Welcome, Dr. Goodell, and I'm going to let her take it away.
All right, excellent. So thanks to everybody for coming. I am here to talk about the medical school and also a little bit about the linkage program that we have with the post-bac program at Hopkins. My preference, I can do my spiel, but honestly, I already did it once today, and I do it 3 times a week. I get super sick of it. So I would much rather answer people's questions. So I will encourage people to ask me all the questions you have, and probably will pause a couple of times during my comments about the school so that you can ask questions as they come up. But I'll start by giving you a little bit of an overview, mostly about what makes BU sort of sets us apart from other medical schools in the country, because I know that when you're thinking about where to apply, it's nice if you can have sort of a feeling of what each school is about. And it's very difficult to get that from the websites. We're doing a website redesign right now, and I was looking at other schools to see some good examples of excellent websites, and I found none that I thought were any good. I thought they were all like, I don't know, like not that easy to navigate and not filled with particularly useful information. They're filled with a lot of detail that I think doesn't really make a difference in people's decision about where to go to medical school. So, all right. So I am going to share my screen though, because I do have some slides. Let's see, here we go. All right. And you'll have to forgive me as I go back to the beginning here. There we go. Okay. All right. So this is me. FYI, so you know who you're talking to. In addition to being the Associate Dean of Admissions for the medical school, I also am a family doctor. I see patients at Boston Medical Center. And in addition to that, I am what's called an Academy Medical Educator, which means that I teach interviewing, physical diagnosis, and clinical reasoning. And I also, in that role, am an advisor for our students as they go through all 4 years of medical school. Okay, let's see. So first important piece of information is that we're in Boston. This is pretty obvious information, I know, but the reason I make a point of it is to say, like, we are really, this is us right here in the foreground, and we actually are kind of more, there's more like over here, this part that's under construction. And so as you can see, we're really like right in the middle of the city. And it's important to know that because I firmly believe that people should feel comfortable during medical school. It should be an experience where you are kind of, I don't know, you're kind of into it. And so that means that people should know that we're like right in the middle of this dense urban core, along with all the things that are part of that. So that means like a lot of the problems and things that we focus on are kind of social justice issues. And I don't know, sort of the other issues that come along with a big city. Boston, I don't know, probably lots of you have been to Boston. It is a great place to be a student. We have 36 colleges and universities in the greater Boston area. Increases the population of the city by 50% when school is in session, which is just insane. It totally changes traffic patterns. But in addition to that, we've got 3 medical schools within inside the city limits. We've got all these high-tech and biotech companies in Boston and Cambridge and the towns right outside. So that all has a really significant impression on what the city feels like. It means that the city is younger than average. It is way smarter than average. And it feels like, I don't know, kind of infused with this energy that you get when you have a whole bunch of young people working really hard at something they think is going to make a difference in the future, which also, by the way, is like how we hope you'll approach your medical education. So, all right. So the most important thing to know about our medical school is that we're a social justice medical school. And you really see that coming out in all of the different ways. It is the patients that we take care of. It's woven specifically into our curriculum. It is the expertise of our faculty. It's kind of everything. And I would say that we are one of like, we're not the only we're not the only social justice medical school, but we are one of a handful, like maybe, I don't know, 5 or so in the country that really, this is like our bread and butter and why we exist. So everybody cares about it, but for us, it's really, you know, the reason that we're here. And so you can see that one of the clearest ways to understand that is to look at our mission. and to look at our history, sorry, and you can look at the history both of the hospital and of the school. So to start with the hospital, our hospital was founded in 1864 when there was a cholera epidemic in the city of Boston. Now, at that time in Boston, there was only one hospital. It was the Massachusetts General Hospital. And also back then, the way that you got into a hospital is that you'd be very sick and you'd have a private physician caring for you at your home. And you'd be so sick that he would decide to admit you to the hospital so he could get help from like nurses to look after you and special equipment and things like that. Well, when the cholera epidemic came to Boston, there were all these people getting sick that were not the sort of people that had a private physician caring for them at home. And so there were all these really sick people that were just kind of like showing up at Mass General Hospital and asking for help. And they got totally overwhelmed. And so the leaders of the hospital went to the leaders of the city of Boston and said, you have to do something about this problem. We have no, resources to provide for these people. We have no mechanism to take care of them. You have to do something. So the leaders of the city of Boston thought, we are a growing and thriving metropolis. Perhaps we should have a second hospital. And so they decided to build another hospital across town. It'd be the Boston City Hospital. You can see a picture of it right here. And, it was a regular hospital where doctors could admit their patients. We needed more beds in general, but also it would be a public hospital where people could just show up and get medical care. This is the first freestanding public hospital in the United States. And we know that this model has been good for us. We've lasted over the years because we were the first public hospital to house an NIH-funded center of excellence, and we were the first public hospital to claim a Nobel Prize. Generally, those things go to big, fancy academic medical centers. Now, obviously, we have changed throughout the years, although I have to say, this building right here is like the one that you can see through the windows behind me. It's like we're still using some of this stuff. The building with the dome is gone. The other ones are still in use. Anyway, so we've added and subtracted other hospitals and institutions of learning. Clearly now we are a big academic medical center. But when you walk around our academic medical center, you see written on the walls and on the stationery and on our ID badges is the hospital's motto, which is exceptional care without exception. We take care of everyone. And we have been doing it since the day we opened, and we're doing it today. Another way to understand our mission is to look at the history of our school. So our medical school was started in 1848. It was the New England Female Medical College. It was the first medical school for women in the United States. And the story behind that is there was this doctor right here in the south end of Boston named Samuel Gregory, and he was extremely busy clinically, and a lot of his work was obstetrics and gynecology. And he started thinking, so Samuel Gregory was a progressive thinker. He believed in expanding educational opportunities to everybody. Specifically, he believed in the education of women. And so he started to think, what if we made a medical school for women? We could train some women to take care of these women's problems. Like that might be nice for everybody. So he started the New England Female Medical College, and this is a picture of one of the first classes. Now, his idea about expanding educational opportunities was broadly considered. If you look here in the middle of the left-hand side of this photo, this is Rebecca Lee Crumpler, and she was the first African-American woman to receive a medical degree in the United States. So as you might imagine, though, not everybody was enthusiastic about that, and the school got a fair amount of pushback, and particularly after Samuel Gregory died, we began to fall in financial hard times. Fortunately for us, across town, a group of abolitionists was starting a university. That would be the Boston University. The whole point of the Boston University was to provide an educational opportunity for people that otherwise didn't have access. So in the founding documents of Boston University, it says admission to all parts of the university shall be open to everyone without regard to race, gender, social status, or religious belief. So as they were building the university and they wanted it to be a full-fledged university with different degrees and different courses of study, they saw the struggling New England Female Medical College across town, and they recognized in them a like-minded partner. And that's when they decided to join forces, and we became the Boston University School of Medicine. And that made us, by the way, the first co-ed medical school in the United States when we began admitting men. You're welcome. Okay, so how does all that history translate to today? So today, one of the ways we describe our work is we say that we practice frontline medicine. And this is where we get to something else about BU that is a little bit hard to tell based on like the website, right? So this is like the vibes. So BU is a school where we are training people who are ready to roll up their sleeves and get to work, solving the biggest problems for the neediest people. We train people to be very proactive in their education. We train people so that when they graduate from the school, they know how to actually do the job of being an intern so that they're really ready to go. Our intention is that our graduates are going to practice medicine. Bunch of different examples of frontline medicine, and a really good one happened in the beginning of the pandemic. This is, well, I should say we were one of those really overwhelmed hospitals at the beginning of COVID, where we had like changed the, recovery room into a COVID ICU and like changed, all the pediatric spaces into like COVID spaces. So we, like many hospitals, had closed our outpatient services because we needed most of the doctors to work in the inpatient setting. Plus, we didn't want healthy people coming to the hospital where all the sick people were. The problem was, as the pandemic dragged on into weeks and months, we realized that there were all these people that were like missing what we thought was very necessary follow-up care. And I'll talk more about our patient population, but generally it's a very vulnerable population. We were worried that people were going to miss things, that they would get sicker. One of the groups that we were super worried about was babies, infants and babies, which you may know have a number of visits throughout the first year of life. So my colleague, Dr. Eileen Costello in pediatrics, worked with my friends in family medicine, and they got a van and they outfitted the van to be like a mobile exam room, and they drove it around the city and did well child checks like out in front of people's houses and in the driveway in the van. And I tell this story because I think it illustrates something important about how we see our role in the community. So I said before, we take care of everyone that shows up, but also it's more than that. We are not just like hanging around in our ivory tower waiting for people to come find us. We feel like we at the hospital are the ones with the expertise, with the resources, with the mental energy, with the wherewithal. We should be the ones who are reaching out to our patients and trying to help them move forward towards the good health they deserve, instead of waiting for people who already face all these obstacles to climb over more of them to come and find us. Another different type of example of frontline medicine is this doctor. This is Nahid Bedalia. She is the director of the Special Pathogens Unit at the National Emerging Infectious Diseases Laboratory. Now, her title is that, well, most of her career has been studying Ebola, and she goes back and forth between her lab at BU and her and various countries in Africa, especially Sierra Leone, to set up Ebola like units in the hospital and to train people in viral containment. So when COVID-19 happened, it was Dr. Bedalia that went into the lab and figured out, like, how long does this thing live on surfaces? Also, what kills it? Like Purell, or do we need something else? Also, how many air exchanges per hour does the hospital HVAC system have to manage in order to be able to keep it to be a safe environment for people? So, when COVID-19 came to Boston, she was on the front line, ready to meet it. This idea about rolling up our sleeves and getting to work is not just for our doctors, it's for our students too. So another way I said that you could see our social justice mission is in how our students spend their free time. And one of the ways is that the most common thing people do is that they participate in some sort of a student-run service activity. So this photo is from the Outreach Van Project, which is a van that is brought to different areas of the city, and they bring clothes and they bring food, and they try to identify people that need medical help and bring them in. As I said, we've got 17 or 18 different service organizations. They really run the whole gamut, from the Teen and Top program, which is like a facilitated group visit for teen parents and their babies, to people who sign up patients to enroll in Alzheimer's research studies, to a program for incarcerated patients to try to argue for compassionate medical release on their behalf. So it's really all these different things that students participate in based on their interest. And then finally, I said before that we're trying to solve the biggest problems for the neediest people. And a lot of them are right in our neighborhood in Boston, but also sometimes they're thousands of miles away. So we have a kind of natural affinity with global health because we take care of so many immigrants and refugees. We have a Center for Refugee Health. 32% of our patients don't speak English as their primary language because that's how new they are coming from other countries. So lots and lots of people here from different places. And so we also have several clinics and rotations that we have set up in other countries that students can just sign up for and do. Like, for example, this is a photo from our clinic in Lesotho that we operate, which is like a little tiny country all surrounded by South Africa. We also have opportunities in Vietnam and in Armenia. So a number of different places that students can go. And we also have an office that will help you kind of create your own opportunity. If you have a country that you've been working in the past or someplace that you volunteered, there's a faculty member who will work with you to create your own global health experience, help you make learning objectives and find a faculty advisor and things like that. I also want to talk about research for a minute. So about 85% of our students do research while they're in medical school. More than 50% graduate with their names on a paper. We have a whole bunch of different ways that you can get involved, everything from like relatively brief, kind of easy to access experiences like the summer between first and second year, all the way up to electives in the third and fourth year, to you can take a whole research year where you are sort of stop your classes for a year and do research and then come back into the curriculum. We have a wide variety of different research opportunities. So one end of the spectrum is the Framingham Heart Study. So that is a now 75-year-old project that initially was created to try to figure out like why people have so many heart attacks and strokes. And so the study looked at the entire population of the city of Framingham, Massachusetts, and followed it longitudinally. And that was the study that got us to know that the reason we care about high blood pressure is because it makes it more likely to have a heart attack or a stroke. The reason we care about cholesterol is because it puts you at risk for a heart attack or a stroke. So it's a really powerful study. It's now in its third generation of participants. So the current study participants are like my age people, and it's the grandchildren of the original study participants. So really, really cool kind of long epidemiologic study. Another type of research is the Center for Chronic Traumatic Encephalopathy. So that is a collaboration between BU and the VA. And this study has, again, provided much of what we know about the impact of repeated concussions on the brain. And a lot of the kind of, news articles have to do with athletes, but it's a collaboration with the VA because, of course, people in combat have a lot of head injuries as well. And so it's looking to see kind of what happens there. That's a center with a few dozen people working at it. It's pretty cool. This is another picture of the NEEDLE, the National Emerging Infectious Diseases Laboratory. So I just wanted to mention that again, because in addition to the Biosafety Level 4 lab, where Dr. Bedelia studied COVID and Ebola, we also have BSL 2 and 3 labs, which are places where people can study things like hepatitis and Zika virus and other sort of less virulent viral pathogens. And then finally, another type of research is done by the Graken Center. So the Graken Center for Addiction is kind of an administrative unit that oversees the clinical care and also research for substance use disorders. They've recently received the largest government grant the federal government has ever given out to address opioid overdose. And so the first step in trying to reduce the number of overdose deaths is to do the research and figure out what are the things that work. Do we need to give everybody Narcan? Do we need to have safe injection sites? Like, what are the things? And so that's kind of how we approach that problem. So those are some examples of the types of research you can do. Okay, I'm actually going to pause. I'm going to stop sharing for a second because I wanted to see if anybody has questions about those things. I'm still going to talk about the curriculum bit, but I'm interested to know if anyone has questions about some of those things that I mentioned.
I know you're going to talk about curriculum, but kind of how early in a student's medical journey at the medical school can they become meaningfully involved in some of these community outreach or community medicine type programs?
Mm-hmm. So if you're talking about service opportunities, it happens right from the very beginning. So we literally have an activities fair. It's like high school or college. And it is up. We have this giant room on the 14th floor. It's like a multi-purpose room with an awesome view. And they have this activities fair and everybody sets up tables. And this year, the number of tables was 146, which is the same as the number of students in the entering class, which is hilarious. But in fact, what happens is most students sign up for several different things that they're interested in, and they end up participating in a couple of them and then eventually running one usually. So yeah, so people, and that happens in August, and people start school August 1st. And then a couple weeks in, they've got the activities fair and they start doing things right away. So it really is immediate. All right. Anything else, or should I go on to curriculum? All right. I will go ahead and go back to my slides. Here we go. Okay. So this is an overview of our curriculum. We have a new curriculum. It's in its second year currently. You can see the kind of basic overview. There are 3 courses in the pre-clerkship phase. So in the green is Pisces. This is our big basic science course, and then it turns blue there, but it's still Pisces. And then the light blue is doctoring, okay, which is clinical skills, interviewing, physical diagnosis, etc. And then these orange bars that you see here is another course called Leads. So what happens in Leads is it's kind of all of the context of medicine. So you learn epidemiology and biostats, you learn medical ethics, you learn, there's an advocacy curriculum. And then there's a period of time where the content is devoted to specific kind of social determinants of health. So there's a module on race and racism in medicine, another one on LGBTQIA medicine, you know, all sorts of different, there are like a dozen different things that are covered there. And then what happens after that is everybody picks one, they pick one area that they're interested in, and then you design a project in that area. And so that's all happening kind of stretched out over time throughout the first 2 years. Now, I said that we have a new curriculum. So the big differences in the curriculum are that we have moved away from lectures, and now we use a flipped classroom model. So content is delivered in the form of these self-learning guides, which have some written material, some videos, a lot of study questions, some that are meant for you to kind of talk through with your peers, some that are more like multiple choice based. The idea is that you should be able to understand the information in a couple of different ways. You should be able to reason through it, and you should be able to, you know, like answer test questions about it. So you get those self-learning guides, and then you, you know, study them for a day and a half or something like that. And then you start having these in-class required sessions. So now class attendance is required, but when you're in class, you're never just listening to a lecture. You're always doing like a problem-solving session or a lab or a team-based learning exercise. So those are kind of the big changes that we've made. The students have really liked it so far. They're very enthusiastic about it. It has, as a faculty member, it has like significantly improved the level of questions that our students are asking us. They're like 3 notches more sophisticated. It's really impressive. We also see it in the doctoring class, which is all kind of case discussions in a small group. We really see that the students' ability to kind of reason through a case is dramatically enhanced now that they're also doing that kind of reasoning in Pisces, their basic science course. And then again, we see it as the students start 3rd year, because when they start 3rd year and they're again just way better at the reasoning part. So so that's really cool. And then the other like little benefit, actually it's not little, is that the students and faculty are really close to each other. They're very engaged because they're in the classroom every day. And so, you know, the students and faculty can see that all of those people are working really hard to learn and to teach and to do the best they can. It makes people really amenable to feedback, because you know that the people that you're talking to are just trying to make whatever it is better. And so there's this really nice kind of positive regard that happens. So that's kind of how the curriculum is set up. You can see it starts in August of the 1st year, and then it goes until February of the 2nd year. Then you've got 5 weeks to prepare for and take step 1. And then in March, you start your 3rd year. So I will just point out that we have still the vacation, 8 weeks of vacation between 1st and 2nd year. We did that because we love you and want you to be happy, but also because our students were doing really awesome things in that 1st year, in that 1st summer, like doing research or going abroad, doing global health, or all kinds of different or community activities. So, and we didn't want to take that away because we thought it was cool. Let's see. The 3rd year is like most medical schools. You rotate through the different core rotations in blocks. You do some of your rotations at Boston Medical Center, which is our primary teaching hospital right next door. You do some of your core rotations at one of our affiliates. And then in the 4th year, you've only got 3 requirements. Everybody takes a geriatrics clerkship. Everybody takes a sub-internship, which is like an advanced clinical clerkship where you've got your own set of patients that you're taking care of and you're kind of the primary go-to decision maker. And then everybody has another either medicine or surgery ambulatory elective. And then the whole rest of the time is really up to you. So you can do research in the 4th year up to 4 weeks, or no, sorry, not 4 weeks, up to 4 months full time. You can do medical education electives. You can do global health, all different kinds of opportunities there. What else can I tell you?
Hi.
Hey, I'm sorry. You go.
Sorry.
Let's have Alex first, and then is it Young Kong?
Yeah, or just call me Toby.
Toby. Okay, Alex, and then Toby.
Okay, awesome. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about some of the projects born out of LEADS, because I think that like the LEADS program sounds really cool.
Yeah.
And how maybe like a specific interest in like reproductive health for underserved communities, maybe like Hispanic speaking communities or LGBTQIA health. If you could just talk a little bit more about how like maybe an interest in that would lead to like research projects or maybe more service opportunities.
Yeah. So as far as LEADS goes, I don't know about the projects because we have never done it before. So the 2nd year class is like it's the first group to go through 2nd year, and that's when they do the projects. And so like I don't have any example, but
apologies, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. But I do have a feel for the kinds of things and how they might work because I know what we've done in the past. So for example, if you were really interested in transgender medicine, say, maybe you would be doing some work with the Center for Transgender Medicine, and maybe your project is like, okay, I would like to start a facilitated support group for people that are considering a gender transition that are at the beginning of it. And so then, you create a project where you would think about like, okay, who are the people I need? What would the timing be? How would we advertise it? How, would we get paid for it? Would it be medical visits, or would it just be like for interest? So you'd have to like sort out the whole project, and you'll have the tools to do that because that's what you learn in LEADS is like how to do that planning and project. And you work with a mentor. So you'd have a mentor in the Center for Transgender Medicine that would help you develop it. At the end of LEADS, you present the project plan. And then the hope is, and the belief is that a bunch of them actually will happen because we anticipate that your mentors will guide you to projects that are things that they kind of need to do. And so what we want is for people to be able to continue that work throughout the rest of their medical school if it's interesting to them.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds great. It sounds like a good like segue into something that you might be more interested in. So thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem at all. Okay, Toby, what can I tell you about?
Hey, thank you so much for the presentation so far. I have 2 questions. So the first question I have is pursuing a dual degree at BU. So like for example, MBA or MPH, how does like kind of BU have those kind of like joint curriculum? And my second question will be kind of like student funding. Like, do we have any merit-based scholarships for students?
So so we have an MD MPH, an MD MBA, and an MD JD, in addition to the MD PhD, of course, but that's a separate thing. So the other dual degree programs, they all are things that you decide after you matriculate. And honestly, it's I don't want to say it's easy to do, but it's very easy to get into. So like what happens is the directors of those programs have an info session. They like send an email to the whole group and say like, if you're interested in this, come to this info session. And then they tell you about what it entails and how to do it. And then you apply, and then they say you're accepted. They basically accept everybody who's a student in good standing at the medical school. So it's not like, oh, I wonder if I can do it. We've never run up against a limitation in spaces. Usually 5 to 10 people do this every year. So there's like enough space for everybody that wants to. Most people choose to do it between 3rd and 4th year, but it's not absolutely required. You can do it other times as well. But it's just that's sort of a natural place for that to work out. So it does add a year to your medical education. But then you sort of, obviously you finish with extra credentials, which is really cool. If you do the JD, it adds 2 years. And then the other thing that you asked was about merit scholarships. So almost all of our financial aid is in the form of need-based scholarships. We do have a small amount of merit scholarships. It's called the Dean Scholarship. There's a formula. It involves GPA and MCAT. We don't share the formula with students because it changes a little bit every year. And then I feel like people would be like all over Student Doctor or Reddit being like, he told me it was blah, blah, blah. And then I'd have to deal with that. So we don't do that. I will say also, it's not a ton of money. We really feel like we're prioritizing financial need over merit. It's like $5,000 or $10,000 is per year what you get if you have that. And we do not do a thing where, this is like far too early to tell you people about this, but I will anyway. We do not do a thing where people are like, oh, but the University of Wisconsin said that they would give me a full tuition scholarship. And to that I say, I hope you enjoy medicine or wherever their medical school is. I don't know. So we don't do a matching thing. I don't have a slush fund for like people that I really, really love a lot. And I'm kind of comfortable with that. I feel like prioritizing financial need is probably a reasonable way to go.
Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm. What else would people like to know?
Could you talk a little bit more about how advising works? So like, I think my understanding is you're assigned an advisor initially, and then you choose a specialty, and then you get another advisor based on that specialty. But could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yep, that's right. So there's actually like a whole bunch of advisors, but the first one is your core advisor, and that person is also your doctoring faculty member. So I talked a lot about Pisces, which is a basic science course, but less about doctoring. Here's how that course works. 8 students, 1 faculty advisor. You meet twice weekly. One of the weekly meetings is with your group and your faculty person, and you do like a case discussion. And in that case discussion, there are always 3 things that are covered. It's like the sort of science of the case. And then we also are building a skill. That's another learning objective. And then the third learning objective is always something about like context or social determinants of health. So for example, this last week, the case for our first year students was a case of this young woman named Mary Garvey. She's in a car accident. She has a spine injury. And so the science part is looking at like, these are the physical exam findings. So how can we localize the lesion? Like what level of the spine is the injury at based on, where her sensation is and where her movement is. And also like, okay, well, the case says they're giving her steroids. Like, why are they giving her steroids? What does that do in the body? So part of it is a science thing. And then another part of it, the skill that we were building was doing the neuro exam. So we sort of like, we're having the case discussion, and then we like interrupted it when we got to the exam part, and we were like, okay, time to learn the neuro exam. And so everybody busted out their reflex hammers and tried to obtain each other's reflexes, and also do the other parts of the neuro exam too, like, whatever, strength testing and coordination and things like that. So that was it. And then the final part was figuring out like, okay, so once she gets treated, once she is getting ready to go home, like, what are we going to do about the fact that she now uses a wheelchair and she lives on the 3rd floor of a triple decker? How's that? What are we going to do about that? So that's how it works. The thing about the advisor, where this ties into advising, is that your advisor is your doctoring faculty member. And in fact, the first event of medical school is breakfast with your doctoring group and your advisor. It happens on the day of the white coat ceremony, before the white coat ceremony, like right before. You leave the white coats, you leave the breakfast, and you go line up. So that's really cool because you get to know your faculty advisor in the classroom. They don't grade you. There are some evaluations that happen in that class. They're done by a different person. And then you keep that faculty advisor for the whole 4 years, which is really cool because you get to know people really well. You build up some trust. Our job is advising wise is basically to make sure people are thriving in medical school. And we have time built into the curriculum to do that. So I think it's not this week, but next week, instead of a small group discussion, what we're going to have is one-on-one 30-minute advising meetings. So we can check in with our students and ask them like, okay, how's it going? You've had a couple of exams now. Do you feel like you need academic resources? Have you made friends? Like, is there anything we can help you with? And then we also just really try to make medical school be a little bit more comfy and fun. So like I had my students over to my house. In fact, I'm planning for another one. So in October, I'm going to have both my first year advisees and my third year advisees over to my house, and we're going to get a mountain of Indian food, and it's going to be great. So there's that. There's also this Office of Student Affairs also they do like big picture advising. If you're in the like, I want to take a year off camp, then you talk to them about that. They also support the Office of Academic Enhancement, which is like a study skills office. They'll help you get a tutor if you need one. They'll help you make a study plan if you need it. That's who makes sure everybody passes the boards. So they've got that. They also oversee all the student organizations. And then you are correct that once you figure out what field you want to go into, then you get a field specific advisor, and that person's job is to get you into residency. And so they'll help you figure out like, do I need to do research to match successfully in this field? Who should I get letters from? Do I need to do away rotations? And then the last little bit of advising that I don't want to leave out is that we have a peer advising network, which is like a group of 4 or 5 first-year students and then a group of 4 or 5 upper-level students. And they also get some funds to like get together and, chit chat. And it's really helpful to have students who are like, oh, okay, like, I know it seems like everybody knows their specialty, but I promise they don't. Everyone's going to change their mind. It's really fine. And things like that. So that is basically how the advising works. That was a really long answer.
Cool. No, I loved it. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
All right. Savannah, what can I do for you?
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to ask, so you mentioned clinical reasoning, and CP Problem Solvers is a podcast that you might be familiar with. It's one of my favorite to listen to, and that's really what they focus on. Yep. I was curious because you mentioned it, like, how do you guys integrate that into the curriculum?
Yeah, so it's very explicitly integrated into the curriculum. And so that part of doctoring was designed by this Dr. Joe Rensick, who is in love with clinical problem solvers. In fact, I'm pretty sure that he's like been on it or been featured in it or helped create it or something like that. So yeah, we really, I'm trying to think of examples, but it's like, that comes in as we're helping our students work through the process of figuring out like what is the most likely differential diagnosis. So for example, we might generate a list of possible conditions like, okay, there's somebody with shortness of breath. So what are all the different things you can think of that it might be like, well, maybe it's a heart attack, maybe it's pneumonia, maybe it's COPD, maybe it's an asthma exacerbation. So we'll like make a big list. And then, for example, we'll say like, okay, well, like, let's now talk about the different things that we learned in the physical exam and the things that we know about the patient, and talk about if they make either any of these diagnoses more likely or less likely. So, okay, so you heard wheezing on the physical exam. So does that make it more likely or less likely that it's an asthma exacerbation? What about COPD? Does it make it more likely or less likely? So we'll like go through all these things, and then we actually literally, talk about like, all right, so given all of that, like, how do you reorder your priorities? What do you think is the most likely thing? So that's an example of how we do that. The faculty are like all going to gang up on Dr. Rensick because he's like always wanting us to talk about likelihood ratios, and everybody's like, oh God, it's so hard to talk about. So that comes into play, like looking at the statistics of it. And then also just, and some other, like we use just a lot of different, like theoretical frameworks for reasoning, again, sometimes it's like really looking at the numbers, like likelihood ratios. Sometimes it's using pluses and minuses, like does this symptom make it more likely or less likely? Sometimes we use frameworks like, okay, what's the can't miss diagnosis here? What's the most likely diagnosis here? What's, and then what's the thing that you think it is, just anyway. So, what does the patient think it is? So that's an example of how we do that. It's all of that is like the clinical reasoning coming in. Pretty cool.
Thank
you. There was a question about international applicants. So we review international applicants in the same pool and the same way that we interview all applicants. We don't have like different standards for any of them. The important thing for people applying internationally to know, there are like 2 key things that people need to be aware of. Thing 1 is that you are not eligible for any financial aid, and that is federal law. Like you can't get federal Stafford loans or anything. So you have to bear that in mind. And then the other piece of information is that if you have a student visa, like you can keep your student visa through medical school, that's no problem. Like Boston University can get you a student visa easy. The trouble is with residency. So it's really important to be aware that you may not be able to go to the career you want or in the geographic area or city that you want, because some residency programs basically don't want to bother with the hassle of getting a special work visa for you. Some programs do, and they're fine with it. And it depends a lot on, you know, where you want to be. But for example, we had one international student who graduated this year, absolutely outstanding student. She was in AOA, which is the Medical School Honor Society. She was terrific. She had really like excellent clinical performance. Everybody loved her. And she matched to internal medicine at University of Nebraska. Now, University of Nebraska is fine. Like there's nothing wrong with it, but like, it's not Mass General or Johns Hopkins, right? And the reason is because programs that have thousands of applicants applying to residency, they don't need to bother themselves with getting a visa for somebody. So I think it's important for people to know that when you're applying to medical school, because if you're like, I must be a neurosurgeon, I would say, try to get permanent residency first. Because it's got, you know, like those programs are just like, they're going to be like, no, or like, I have to live in New York City. I'd be like, probably actually New York City is okay, but you know, because there are a lot of hospitals there, but I think it can be hard. You just don't have as much guarantee that you'll be able to do what you want to do. What else would people like to know?
Hey, I just had a quick question about, I have like a language background, so I studied Spanish and Mandarin, and was able to use that in my career to varying degrees. And I'm curious about how people like come in with language skills and integrate that into their med school experience and maybe their volunteer opportunities,
Yeah.
And service opportunities.
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things, it's funny that I somehow managed to not talk about patient diversity that much, but anyway, so one of the best ways to understand the diversity of our patient population is to look at languages. So because 32% of our patients don't speak English as their primary language. And when you look at the interpreter services report, the average number of languages that they provide interpretation for every week is 72 different languages. And I ask you, can you name 72 different languages off the top of your head? Like, I'm not sure how far I would get before I would run out of languages that I knew the names of. And so it's really cool. It's a really, I don't know, it makes it for a really fun experience. Because we have so many patients that they're also so vulnerable in terms of socioeconomic status. Most of our patients, 79% are either publicly insured or uninsured. So we have a lot of poor people. So we have very strict rules, the hospital does, about who can provide service in another language. You have to be a bilingual provider in order to provide medical care in a language that's not English. The way that you do that is take a test. So if you're fluent in another language, it's fine. And the test is like, you go and you talk to an interpreter and they're like, okay, fine, you're fine. But it's interesting, that really exists to prevent hacks such as myself, who know a little bit of Spanish, but not that much, it's not great, from being like, well, it's probably be fine. I'll just do my best and muddle through. No, because like patients deserve to actually be understood with all the nuance, not just like my muddling, you know? So yeah, that's why you have to be a bilingual provider. That being said, you can do that as a student. But in addition, there are also a whole bunch of ways that you can talk to patients in the languages that you know, in the context of like different service opportunities, or as long as it's like casual chit chat. So for example, we would say like, look, if you're going into round in the morning and you're talking with a patient, you're really collecting information, it's going to go into the medical record, like all that stuff, you need to be using an interpreter. But on the other hand, you know, and I'm just like profiling you and guessing that Mandarin is not your native language. So
yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So maybe
I did a program to become professionally proficient in it, but I'm still very much a foreigner.
Okay. So
yeah.
actually, if you're professionally proficient, then that's probably good. But anyway, so say like, you know, what you might be able to do though, what would be perfectly fine, and students do this all the time, is like if you're having like a brief conversation with someone, or you're chit-chatting with them, or you're saying hi, you know, hey, I brought you this water that you were asking for, or some new ice water, how are you doing? Like, that's fine. And then the other thing is, we actually have a service opportunity that is a club that is called the Socially Responsible Surgery Club. This thing is really cool. You basically go into the hospital and you visit patients that have had surgery and are about to be discharged, and you help them, like you make sure that they have all the things they need to be successful. So sometimes it's like, okay, so you're about to go home. Do you know what you need to do as far as a follow-up appointment? And people will be like, oh yeah, I'm supposed to have an appointment in 2 weeks, but I haven't made it yet. Oh, okay. Do you want me to call right now while I'm here with my phone? I can just call and just make the appointment for you. And so, or like, okay, you've got a bunch of wound care supplies. Do you have a bag? You know what I mean? Do you need an Uber voucher to get to your appointment? Like these things that we students can problem solve about. That you do when you sign up in whatever other languages you speak, because that's not providing medical care. It's not like the main bulk of medical care. It's like friendly chit chat, making people comfortable. So that's a way that a lot of students do that in order to practice the other languages that they speak. We have, the other thing is that we offer medical Spanish and medical Mandarin. Medical Spanish is actually offered at 3 different levels. It is student run. There's like one level for absolute beginners that want to get some familiarity. There's another level that's like for people that studied, that'd be like for me, for people that studied Spanish and know a little bit, but really need to like practice to get better. And then there's another one for people that like, they speak Spanish, but they need to know medical Spanish. That highest level is taught by, or is led by, or was, now she's a 3rd year, so she's probably too busy, but one of my advisees, Guada, who is bilingual. Her family is from Argentina. She was raised in Miami. She is absolutely bilingual, and she worked as a medical interpreter. So like, she's like, no, I can teach the class. So that's kind of cool. So we have those opportunities for people as well, either to like sign up and participate or to teach. And then we have one in medical Mandarin, actually, that's led by Dan Chen, who's one of the assistant deans for student affairs.
Cool. Do you have levels as well in Mandarin?
I don't think so. I think that's just one.
Okay. Gotcha.
Okay. Probably not that many people. I don't know. Although I don't know. We have a lot of, this past year, 24% of our first year class were native speakers of a non-English language, which is pretty amazing. 82%
really
speak
cool.
the language, but 24% were non-native speakers. It's pretty good. Or were native speakers in the language. And somebody else asked a question about if we have a preference for in-state students or do we prefer out-of-state students? And the answer is like, no, we don't care. In fact, like every day I get like 5 little emails from AMCAS that's like, so-and-so changed their state of legal residence. And I'm like, it just doesn't matter to me, not even a little bit. Doesn't matter. We end up, the school that sends us the most matriculants, well, Boston University is the school we get the most students from. But after that is UCLA, and UC Berkeley's 3rd. And then Michigan, I think. So we have people from everywhere. And MD PhD is a little bit different because you have to be able to apply for different types of funding, but the MD PhD program does in fact also accept international students. Yeah. So let's see, there was one other, I think it was Alex was asking about wellness and student support and things like that. So we have kind of like all the things that you would think of for wellness. We have like, it's like, this is like the low-hanging fruit of wellness, which is like free yoga classes in the Headspace app, right? Like, yeah, we have that. But I think more important is basically how the school responds to and incorporates student feedback into what we do. So for example, we recently renovated the library and made a whole new student lounge space because students felt like they needed more study space and more lounge space. We modified our curriculum. So originally we made the new curriculum. We made it so that everybody had to be in class every day, like every morning. And the students were like, okay, we like the curriculum. We understand being in class and having required attendance. But could we just please have one day where we don't have to get up and be someplace at 8 or 9 a.m.? Like that would be great. And so we were like, okay, that seems fair. You're just coming off a pandemic. College, you usually don't start so early every single day. And we are asking you to do a lot of studying. So on your own time. Okay. So they changed the schedule and they made a couple, like the first day and a half optional attendance. And so you can come or not, depending on what you want to do. So I think actually that is probably speaks more to how the school responds to wellness, which is to say that we take student concerns seriously. We try to make sure we're doing everything we can to enable people to have a life and to feel good during medical school. We also have, we have a mental health counselor that's on our campus so that you can get a quick appointment if you need a quick appointment. Everybody gets, there's a whole cadre of primary care doctors, and this seems like a small thing when you're like 22 and really healthy, but we actually made it so there's this group of primary care doctors that does not teach medical students, and they said, no problem, I will make same day appointments. I will promise that if a medical student needs a same day appointment, I will see them because I don't grade them. And so I can provide the medical care. You can come, I do sick visits all the time. You come see me, but then that's not fair because then I'm going to grade you later. So you can't do that. That's against the rules. So again, that's just a little example of a problem that you're thinking well, I'm healthy, I'm fine, it's no big deal, which is all well and good until you develop a UTI at the end of October and you're like, oh no, do I seriously have to spend 6 hours of my life in the emergency room right now? And the answer is no, you do not. You can go see the doctor that said I would be happy to have a quick appointment for medical students the same day. So these are the kinds of things that we try to do to make sure that we have good, that people are feeling well. I will also say that the engagement, the level of increased engagement with the students now that we have the new curriculum and students are with faculty all the time and talking to them and learning with them. I actually really think that is a huge promoter of student wellness. People feel like they feel connected, they feel supported. Medical school really is hard. It is much easier if you feel like you're doing it with a group, or okay, I know these people have got my back. I know we're all in this together. That makes it so much better. So I actually think that's huge. And I should say too, we have a student group called the Wellness Initiative, and they arrange for puppy therapy and they give treats before exams. Actually, they worked with the Run Club to have a run. The Run Club is one of our fun organizations because some people apparently think that running is fun. Teach their own. I mean, okay, if you think so. All right, very good. Let's see what else is in the chat here. We offer in-state tuition rates to veterans using the post 9/11 GI Bill? Really good question. I actually have absolutely no idea about that. But if you email me, I will connect you with the Office of Student Financial Services, and they will be able to answer that question. I'm sorry that I wish I knew the answer to that. I wish that more people would take advantage of the military scholarships just in general because they're amazing. All right. Anything else? It's 6:03. I feel like we did a good job.